SpaceX has flown Starship to space and back. It has moved propellant between two tanks inside one ship. It has never moved cryogenic propellant through a sealed line into a second Starship in orbit. Refueling one spacecraft from another already has history. A Soviet Progress freighter refueled the Salyut 6 station in 1978, and Progress vehicles still support station refueling today. Those transfers use propellant that can wait in space without being kept near impossible cold. The Artemis version is different. This is the fuel transfer with 0 times behind it. Starships dock together, a sealed coupling between the holes, cryogenic propellant crossing from one vehicle to another. No plume, no open spray, just a docking interface, a transfer line, valves, pressure, and liquid cold enough to disappear if the system loses control. Even the demonstration has 2 vehicles. A target ship launches first. A chaser follows weeks later. They dock, propellant crosses, then both deorbit. That is the plan, not a result. NASA's Inspector General lays out the full architecture. A Starship storage depot goes to low Earth orbit first. Then more than 10 Starship tankers launch with propellant. Each one has to rendezvous, dock, and transfer propellant into the depot. Propellant aggregation begins more than 200 days before the crew launches, and SpaceX is targeting 1 tanker flight every 6 days until enough propellant is collected. Only then does the lander arrive. If the first crewed lunar landing flies on Starship HLS, the lander has to dock with the depot, draw propellant from it, and depart for lunar orbit before it can carry astronauts to the surface. NASA's current architecture points to Artemis 4 in early 2028 as the first landing target. NASA has not selected which provider carries that crew. Lander readiness determines who flies, while NASA plans to decide about the new mission architecture in summer 2026. The hidden fueling step has to work at the scale the mission requires. The viewer sees a giant rocket and assumes the rocket is the risk. The more dangerous gap may be smaller, the plumbing between 2 separate holes. NASA's own audit says it directly. SpaceX's concept requires cryogenic propellant to be loaded, transferred, and stored in space. The audit states that the technologies and processes being used are entirely new and have never been done vehicle to vehicle. The same audit says the HLS program considers demonstrating cryogenic propellant transfer one of the most significant technical challenges facing the provider. This is about making 2 independent spacecrafts behave like one fuel system long enough for the liquid to move. Transfer has flown in a narrower form. On Flight 3 on March 14, 2024, SpaceX moved liquid oxygen from a header tank into the main tank inside one Starship, under NASA's tipping point work. NASA's Amit Kastria later called that intertank cryogenic transfer successful by all accounts. That matters. It proves SpaceX has moved cryogenic propellant in space. It does not prove a second vehicle can receive it. In the Flight 3 test, the tanks live inside one hole. The plumbing is internal. The vehicle is one structure. The Artemis architecture adds a second spacecraft, a docking interface, a cryogenic coupling, and a transfer path across a joint that has to stay sealed while both vehicles orbit Earth. One version flew, the other has flown 0 times. The schedule reflects that gap. The Inspector General says the large-scale vehicle-to-vehicle cryogenic propellant transfer test was planned for March 2025, then delayed 12 months to March 2026. Gao's July 2026 assessment says the propellant transfer test is scheduled for 2026. SpaceX is more than a year behind its original schedule for key events, and cryogenic fuel management remains a top program risk. The rocket kept improving around that missing step. Flight 13 carried no transfer demo. It deployed 20 Starlink V3 satellites. It completed a successful in-space Raptor relight after a cryogenic coast, roughly 39 minutes after liftoff. That relight matters for future deorbit burns. It does not move propellant into another vehicle. The booster showed the other half of the same problem. Flight 12, the V3 and Raptor 3 debut, ended with a hard booster splashdown after an early-ended boost-back burn. Flight 13 also ended with an underperforming booster landing burn and a hard splashdown, while the ship came down soft and, for the first time, stayed intact and floating. Recovery can wait for one transfer demonstration. It cannot wait forever if the plan has to repeat. In April 2024, Kshatriya listed the questions that still had to be characterized at this scale: Boiloff, leakage, ullage, and how much propellant actually crosses compared with the plan. If you want to understand what still has to work before one Starship can fill another, not just the next flight SpaceX announces, subscribe to SpaceWatch. Those questions sit inside the engineering of cryogenic fluid behavior. Decades of cryogenic fluid work exist on the ground. The missing environment is the full operation at Starship scale, in orbit between two independent spacecraft, with the coupling sealed and both vehicles stable enough for the system to behave. Boil-off and leakage are the losses the system has to control while the propellant stays extremely cold. Ullage is the microgravity problem. The liquid floats and it has to settle over the tank outlet, so the transfer line draws liquid instead of gas. Transfer efficiency is the final accounting, the amount that actually crosses compared with what the mission needs. That is why the connection between the holes matters more than it looks. The sending vehicle has to feed the line without uncovering the outlet. Two massive vehicles have to stay docked while the fluid system settles into a condition that planners can predict. The receiving vehicle has to leave with the planned amount because the lunar leg depends on the margin that actually arrives. And every kilogram that boils away, leaks, or fails to cross changes how much margin the lander carries afterward. A relight after a cryogenic coast answered a narrower question. It showed an engine can restart after the vehicle has coasted cold. The boundary it does not cross is the one between two spacecraft, sealed coupling and verified quantity inside the second ship. For a lunar landing mission, the operation has to work repeatedly. More than 10 tankers have to launch. The target cadence is roughly one tanker every 6 days. Each tanker has to rendezvous, dock, transfer, separate, and make room for the next one. The depot has to keep propellant cold across the aggregation period that starts more than 200 days before crew launch. That is where other numbers matter. The OIG says SpaceX has yet to demonstrate the required 12 to 24 day turnover of its launch pad. That is already slower than the 6-day tanker target. NASA has not decided who flies the first crewed landing. Its own 2025 engineering paper says both Starship and Blue Moon Mark II concepts require in-space cryogenic transfer between independent spacecraft. Neither company has done it. That reinforces the scale of the missing step. The problem is larger than one company. Modern lunar landing plans are beginning to depend on propellant moving between vehicles in orbit. Two Starships meet in low Earth orbit. The coupling seals, a valve opens, the rocket program becomes a fluid system, and the lunar architecture waits on the amount that crosses. Until that moment, the depot is only a promise. The tankers are only a schedule, and the lander is still waiting for the fuel system to prove itself. A launch can look successful before the hardest part of this sequence has even begun. At that point, the mission depends less on the height of the rocket or the brightness of the launch, and more on the joint between two holes. The lander NASA chooses only moves on with the propellant it actually receives. If that amount comes up short, the next step of the moon plan waits at the valve.